Hi class, today we're going to talk about the audit communication assignment. If you go into your class under week 4 and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that all the resources are at the end of week 4. I wanted to give you a heads up though so you can kind of get a feel for what you'll need to do with this assignment. This is a project that's going to basically take most of the time during this course. The first thing you'll need to do is look at the instructions for this project. This communication audit project is addressing various different competencies in communication that we are going to look at in this class. Things like critical thinking, using information resources, using the communication theories that we have learned and applying them to communication challenges, and also teach you the competency of consultancy or consultation, which is the ability to provide guidance to organizations, either as an internal or external consultant. So, all organizations have some kind of communication challenge. If you are called in to identify what is the issue with the communication in this organization, you would probably use what we call a diagnostic tool, a communication audit, that helps you to kind of measure what's going on in the organization and what the problem is. What you're going to do is you're going to administer this communication audit survey in your organization. So start thinking about where you can do this. You want to survey about 15 to 20 people. You can do this online if you use something like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, or you can just print it out and distribute it to your participants and ask them to respond. The survey has questions that asks about 5 different areas of organizational communication. The first one is receiving information from others. The second is sending information to others. The third is sources of information. Fourth is timeliness. And 5 is channels of communication. The survey is going to help you identify which of these areas in the organization is having trouble or problems. Let's take a look at the actual survey. Okay, so let me go back because it seems like the hyperlink is not working. And just go right down here to Communication Audit Survey. And let me pull this up. There we go. So the survey is based on the International Communication Association survey. And the way it's laid out is your participants are able to answer on a scale from 1 to 5. So for example, in the first section, we asked them about receiving information from others. The participants are supposed to check, in terms of receiving information from others, do I receive information on how well I am doing my job? 1 is very little and 5 is very great. On organizational policies, pay and benefits, mistakes and failures, how I'm being judged. The second category is sending information to others, and the participant here will answer some questions about how they communicate with other people in the organization. The third is sources of information, and there are several questions asking about the level of information between different categories or different groups within the organization. Next is timeliness, and how timely is the information that the participant receives from these people. And last is channel of communication. What are the different ways that your participant receives communication in the organization. Okay, let's go back to the next step. So once you have done your audit and you have collected all this information, you will then analyze and synthesize the results of your data. The way you want to do this is you want to create some kind of spreadsheet or chart that will give you a summary of all the numbers and will allow you to see where is the low score, where is this organization having trouble. Let's see an example of that. If you look at the collecting and analyzing data from your survey attachment, here we go. You're going to see an example of a chart with responses from 8 participants. And I used only 8 just to give you an example. So let's go through and I'll explain it. All right, here are the questions from 1 to 37. There are 37 total. Here are the responses from each person in my survey. And here is the average. And so what I can do now is, and I've color-coded the different areas to help you. So for example, this first area, which is colored in blue, represents that first section, receiving information from others. So there are 2 things that you should be able to do. One, you should be able to go through each section and figure out where the lowest scores are. So for example, if you add up these numbers and then divide by however many questions there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you'll get an average for the entire section. This is not done here in this sample, but I will tell you, because I've done this before, that the lowest scores for this particular survey were found here in the green area, which is the 3rd category, which is sources of information. This leads me to believe then that there is a problem in the communication in the organization within the sources of information. I can further narrow this down by going back and looking at the specific questions. And if I look at the specific questions, I can see that 15, 17, 19, 21, almost like the odd numbers, always scored much lower. So let's go back to the instrument and see what do those numbers actually represent. If I pull up that communication survey again, I'm going to see that in section 3, sources of information, subordinates, individuals in other units, department meetings, formal management presentations scored the lowest. And so based on that, I may be able to determine some of the sources of the communication problems in this organization. It seems like there's not a lot of communication within other departments or units or in the department meetings or in formal management presentations. So I could probably assume that there is some kind of problem in the information coming from top to bottom. What do I do with that? The next part of what you're going to do with your results is described in the instructions. This is where the research comes in. And you now need to do some research and figure out what could you advise this organization to do to help. So Based on the communication audit, identify one critical communication challenge that needs to be addressed within your organization. Don't try to talk about or write about 3 or 4 different things. I would rather you choose one topic and go deep. Research the scholarly literature for recommendations about how the organization can address this issue. We're going to be talking about this in the discussions in class. The last thing you're going to do is create and deliver a business presentation that will provide the results of what you learned to, let's say, the leadership of this organization. You're going to provide suggestions for improvement based on the data, and you're going to support your suggestions with the literature on organizational communication. So again, and I've said this several times, don't just throw in your opinions. Support your opinions with best practices, with literature, with research, books and articles, and readings from our class that tell us what works if this is the problem that we have in our organization. The last part of the instructions talks about the format of the audit report. I'm not going to really go over this. You will be able to read it on your own, but I suggest you present it as a PowerPoint slide and have notes underneath it. You can add audio to your slides if you want, or you can just have the narrative underneath your slides. Don't forget that even in a PowerPoint, you have to use APA. So if you use a citation to support your suggestions, you have to cite them. You can also choose to use some other kind of software. Don't buy any software. Use the free forms of Prezio or Animoto or GoAnimate. And be sure and look at the rubric for this assignment before you begin working and submitting the assignment. I hope this presentation helped, and of course, email me or post a question in the class if you have any questions at all about this assignment.